already. The date is April 26th of 2016. And I want to personally welcome you to the Nick of Time News Show. Thank you for tuning in and welcome. In case you were not aware by the subtext, the video description, this is the first ever Nick of Time News Show, and I could not be more thrilled. I am your host, Nick Dorsey, and I'm just letting you know now this may get a little rough. This is obviously, like I said, the first show, but in addition to that, I don't quite have everything I need to make it sound the way that I want. I'm still campaigning. I actually set up a GoFundMe for the rest of the amount that I need. Originally, the plan was to be completely self-funded on this project. My goal was to launch around about January of next year, the beginning of 2017. But with everything that's happening and the fact that we are in an election year, I had to launch because there's just way too many things that I need to talk about and way too much work that needs to be done. Now, I do want to take a brief moment and tell people that I'm very thankful for all of you that have liked, shared, commented, given me advice, told me to keep at it, and of course those who donated to my campaign. I very much appreciate all the love that I have received in the last couple weeks. Of course, like I said, it's not quite as polished as the results as I'm looking for, but I felt like what needs to go out there, or the information that needs to be spread around is so important that I had to launch early. However, if you are interested in helping me secure the last of the finances I need to get the equipment and get the website going and everything else exciting that I have planned, I'm still always going to remain mostly self-funded, but that last little bit that I need for a real launch 2.0, if you will, is just a little bit ahead of where I'm at now. $10, $20, even a simple share can go a really long way. So in the description of the video, I'll be posting the link to my campaign, so you can go ahead and check it out. Now, this is my first show. There's so much I want to talk about that's going on. A lot of people are the huge topic right now is the transgender bathroom laws. I definitely want to dive into that. Obviously, the primaries are in full swing. I want to dive headfirst into the Republican primary. There's so much that needs to be discussed between the three-way battle right now with, of course, the Donald, Trump, Ted Cruz, and John Kasich. I mean, there's just a ton of headlines coming out of that. But for now, I wanted to focus my first show on something that is very, near and dear to my heart. And that would be the Democratic primary side of the presidential race. And more specifically, the issue that has come with it. There is so many headlines that have come out of the primaries. I'm not going to say more than I've ever seen before, because, there have been some pretty interesting topics to discuss in the past. But this is definitely going to be one for the books. We're seeing candidates like we've never seen before. We're seeing tactics like have never been discussed before. And not all of it's clean. I got to tell you, folks, it's not all clean. When it comes down to the nitty-gritty, there's some crazy stuff that is happening and being addressed, especially in terms of the voter suppression. Now, I might get a little off topic here, just diving into the generalities of the Democratic primary race going on and some other stuff, but I did really kind of want to focus on voter suppression. Now, obviously, everybody knows we live in a democracy. We live in a place where everybody's vote should be counted, everybody's vote should be equal, and the votes that we give to people should be the most important thing that runs the country. It should be our interests. Problem is, there are a lot of problems in making all of those things happen. With the Electoral College and the two-party system, it's hard to say that our votes were equal anyways. It's hard to say that, we were on level playing grounds before this primary election. But some of the things that have happened are just disgusting. I mean, there's no other way to say it. It's just mind-boggling, the things that are taking place that are completely unprecedented in this election. The first and foremost is the reason that I said today is the day. I got to sit down. I got to finish recording. I have to get this on the hot plate, if you will, so people can hear what's going on. And that is the events of last night. Now, of course, we all know about the earlier voter suppression. I'm going to go ahead and get into that a little bit later. But I wanted to talk about first the tactics that were used last night. So I've dived as much as I could into the information to make sure what I'm presenting is accurate. Of course, I have my Twitter page, my email. I'm going to give all that at the end of the show. I always like the fact checkers. If there's something that I said that was wrong, or there's something that develops later, I'm always going to bring it up because my goal is to make sure that the information that is presented to you guys is absolutely the most honest and the most up-to-date. So I did a little bit of diving, and I did find that it's coming out that one of Hillary Clinton's super PACs, which is basically the entity that receives the donations on behalf of Hillary Clinton, since that's how you have to take large sums of money indirectly. That's how millionaires and billionaires are able to donate large sums of money to Hillary Clinton. So it looks like one of the Hillary Clinton super PACs, which is known as Correct the Record. That's the name of it. It's she has a couple, so it's just one of a few super PACs at least. Allegedly, it looks like they shelled out a lot of money. From reports, what they're saying is that over $1 million has been shelled out to hordes of online trolls. Online trolls is what the Hillary camp is worried about right now. That's what they're paying for. Because, as we all know, the younger voters are burners for the most part. A lot of the younger voters, I'm not going to say that all of them. That would be ridiculous. I've met some younger people who are going for Trump, actually. I've met some younger people who are going for Hillary. But overwhelmingly, young voters are for Bernie Sanders, or in an overwhelming, amount. So what that basically says is the information that's coming out about Bernie on the internet is basically some of the most positive information about his campaign, and it's how a lot of whatever is going on gets spread around, through various websites, through various online news shows, and then of course on social media, Twitter, and then most recently the issues with these Facebook groups. So, I mean, if you go online, you could probably find at least 50 groups for every candidate out there right now. And to be honest, I've actually part of many of them because I like to see what people are saying. I like to see what Ted Cruz's fans are saying. I like to see what Donald Trump's fans, Hillary Clinton's fans, and of course Bernie Sanders. I'm in a lot of those groups for all the presidential candidates. So I understand that they're very important tools in order to, make sure that morale is up. A lot of times when I'm in the Bernie Sanders groups, people are talking about phone banking, getting on the phone for the campaign, making sure that everybody's on time to the voting places, and that, if they can carry more passengers, if they're going in a car, coordinate those kinds of efforts. If they have the ability to, canvass, if I'm in Pennsylvania and I want to go ahead and canvass, for Bernie, I get a call from somebody in California who said, are we going to be able to count on you to do that? That's what phone banking is basically all about. But there's a lot of news stories, things that don't make the other candidates look very good. And, of course, there's always been trolls on there. If you go on any page, there's trolls. There's people who aren't trolls, but they seem like trolls because they go for another candidate. So if I'm a a hardcore Bernie Sanders fan and I get on Donald Trump's page, some people will mistake the things that are said as oh, that person's a troll, but in reality they're just a fan of a different candidate. But there are people who really don't care about politics or this election, and they are getting on there and just trying to get reactions out of the hardcore fans, and that is the very definition of trolling. But what's happening with the super PAC is they're actually paying not just to troll, they're paying these users on Facebook to actually help get the groups shut down, and that's exactly what happened. So allegedly, what's coming out of the story is that there's been 8 major Facebook groups have been taken down collectively as of last night. Obviously, being 5, with there being 5 major primary contests. There's 19 left. 5 are today, so this is like Super Tuesday 3 or 4. And I can't even keep track anymore. And they're pretty important. There's Pennsylvania today. I know Maryland's today, Rhode Island's today. And because of these trolls, they've actually taken the groups down. So the story that's coming out of what happened is basically that people made fake accounts, or they used secondary accounts or whatever, and they actually published child pornography. They actually published. It's disgusting. I don't even know what to say. It's like, how bad can you get? Like, let's think of the worst of the worst of the worst thing that we can do, and that's like actively scope out and collect child pornography. And what they did was they just spammed the groups with it. They posted it, and then obviously it got reported over and over and over and over again until Facebook took down the groups. So the 8 groups were actually the Bernie Sanders activists, Bernie Believers, Bernie or Bust, Bernie Sanders Revolutionaries, Bay Area for Bernie, Bernie Sanders 2016, Ideas Welcome, Bernie Sanders is my hero, and finally, Bernie Sanders for President 2016. Among those 8 groups, they collectively have 250,000, 250,000 active members. They had 250,000, 250,000 roundabouts unique users. So obviously there's like 80,000 in one, 60,000 in another. Some of those people carry over to the same group, but that roughly between the 8 of them, 250,000, not just active users, but active politically inclined users. So they're always talking about politics. They're like activists, and people who really, really care about politics, and they're totally cut off from giving people's information, for getting information themselves, about knowing what's going on. It's literally your voices are being silenced. And what drives me nuts is it's not necessarily the fact that trolls were hired, but what kills me is the fact that people's voices are being silenced. And you just gotta think to yourself, if this is the kind of stuff that we're seeing, not even in the general election, which, oh man, the fireworks that are going to take place, but in the primaries, in the primary election, you are going to see this kind of suppression. It's mind-boggling. It's nuts. It's absolutely nuts. And with the amount of atrocities that have already taken place from the Hillary camp, I just don't know how much more they can take. This is like the lowest of the low, spamming groups with child pornography. Forget the fact that Bill Clinton already broke the law and was campaigning in Massachusetts outside of a voting location, which was not only stalling voters from getting in, but is also illegal to campaign outside of a voting polling place. So it's, we're going to see the blowback that the campaign sees from this. But for the most part, for what I'm seeing, it's really not going to be good. If Hillary Clinton was trying to even possibly think about kind of maybe getting the young voters back into her camp, which, let's be honest, she is going to need in the general election, this is not the way to go about it. This is not the way to do it. The common stereotype that you always hear is that the young voters are the least informed. But with technology, I mean, it just doesn't seem to be the case in my experience. The young voters are some of the most well-informed people that I've talked to in this election cycle. I've talked to voters of many ages, and a lot of times I get like one or two mediocre reasons of why they're voting for their candidate. I only have one reason why I'm voting for Trump. It's because he says it like it is. No, I have one reason I'm voting for Hillary Clinton. Because, we need to gain true gender equality, and she's the only person who's going to do that. Now, obviously, I'm not saying for everybody. Some people are well informed. But for the stereotype to be the way it is, it just seems really backwards for me. Because in my experience, because of how much young voters are on the internet, just trying to get as much information as possible about as many issues as possible, it never seems to be the way the stereotype dictates. It always seems to be the other way around. But the thing about the Facebook incident is actually, this isn't even the first time that we're hearing about voter suppression. Now, like I said, tonight there's 5 contests. We're getting results live, actually. And it's looking like Hillary Clinton's going to win at least 2 or 3 out of 5 of these contests. It's still too early to tell for a couple of them. But, we're getting the live results in. And from what I'm seeing, she is actually winning a couple today. But of the last 10 before today, Bernie Sanders actually won 8 of the primaries and caucuses that were before today. 8 out of 10. Of the 8 out of the last 10, rather. And the other 2 were Arizona and New York. And they were actually both won by Sanders. I'm sorry, they were both won by Hillary Clinton. But the problem is that they're actually reporting unprecedented levels of voter suppression for different reasons, actually. Arizona actually cut the voting locations down to where you're having over 1 million voters voted something like 61, 62 voting locations. So since that was such a huge decrease from the last election, and the same amount of people, or even more so, are voting in this election, obviously it creates an issue. Because you're going to be waiting in line, like 4, 5, 6 hours with that many people voting and such few locations. And that's exactly what happened. People were reporting they had to wait in line so long, people were leaving. That's ridiculous. Not everybody has the physical capacity. You don't even have to be, you can be disabled, but you don't even have to be disabled. Not everybody can just stand up in 100-degree heat, which is, the kind of weather that you see in Arizona commonly, for hours on end. And it's ridiculous to expect people to do that. And then on top of that, there were a couple cases where voters were having their registration changed. People were Democrats, and they were getting changed to independents. And some people were independents, and they switched their voter registration to Democrats, but it did not switch. Like, they got a confirmation that it switched, so they have proof that it switched. And then when they went up to actually vote, it said what their original party preference was. So they weren't able to vote for the person that they wanted. So obviously, that's huge. If you're going to stand in line for 4 hours and then you're not even able to vote for the person you got there for, obviously the numbers are going to be skewed. Not good. Not good when we live in a democracy. You should be able to vote. There should be no such thing as a closed primary. It's bad enough that you have the two-party system. But if you're going to have that, you definitely shouldn't have a closed primary. Because then I have to switch my party preference every election. If somebody next year who I really like runs as a Republican, I'm going to have to switch my party nomination and keep doing it over and over and over again. What if I forget to? What if the deadline passes and I haven't done that? Then all of a sudden my voice, it doesn't count. So obviously a lot of issues need to be fixed. And that was just Arizona. There was also a whole nother issue in New York. By the way, Arizona is officially being investigated by the DOJ, the Department of Justice. Yeah, I mean, we've seen some investigations from them in the past, right? We've seen things be quote unquote investigated, and let's be honest, it didn't really pan out, but something is being done, and obviously that just goes to show that something really was wrong. There's some kind of merit in the reports that we're hearing coming out of Arizona, because if they feel like it's necessary to have an investigation, then obviously there was some validity to the things that people were saying, as part of the issues that were down there. Now, in terms of New York, they actually had a whole different issue. They had some of the same issues. People did report that, and some of the weirdest reports were that out of people who were registered as Democrats for a very long time, they were being switched over. But a lot of people reported as completely removed from the voter rolls, which means that they showed up to their polling place to vote, and they were told they weren't on the list or whatever. They weren't a registered voter right there. So they could not vote. And you think, okay, well, if that happens to 100 people, 200 people, even 1,000, even 10,000 in a place like New York, that's really not a big deal. Because the margin of votes is almost somewhere in the hundreds of thousands because of how populated New York is. The problem is there was literally hundreds of thousands of voters missing from the voter rolls. Hundreds of thousands. So much so that the Attorney General literally had to launch an investigation, and some people from the Board of Elections have already been fired. They've already been terminated. So all of that is still up in the air. We're going to go ahead and see if they're going to be able to count the provisional ballots in New York, which was basically the ballot that some people had to fill out because they weren't registered as voters, even though it was, obviously incorrect. And all of this, wrapped up into a nice picture is basically you're looking at one big case of voter suppression. Now, I want to dive into why I'm talking about all this, why I'm doing this. The reason I'm even launching this show, launching this project. And the reason I'm doing that is because everyone is so hooked into their TVs, is so hooked into media. I watch Republican debates. I watch Fox News. I watch MSNBC. I watch CNN just to kind of see what they're saying. And when I talk to people about politics, which is, something I end up doing on a daily basis because of how much I'm involved in it, I literally hear the same lines like regurgitated. I hear the same fear-mongering that Fox News spreads out there just regurgitated. It's all just regurgitated. And the reason is because 90% of the media in this country, 90% is controlled by 6 corporations. Literally, General Electric, GE, News Corp, Disney, Viacom, Time Warner, and CBS. those 6 corporations own 90% of the information. Now, obviously, if someone has that much money, if someone has that much power, if an entity has that much money and has that much power, it tells you the inevitable truth that they're willing to skew information to influence people in a certain manner. They're willing to skew information to get people to do what they want to do. And when you hear people say the things like the establishment, it's that kind of corporate power that people are talking about. So when I say, this is my way of fighting mainstream media, this is my way of fighting the establishment, that's what I'm talking about. I'm not sponsored by any of those guys. So I have the ability to freely give you real-time, real-life information of the issues that are affecting this country without being pressured to say or do certain things. And that's my goal. And that's exactly why we're seeing this election turn out the way that it is. Because so many people see the information. That's how most people are being informed. That's how they're getting their information. The quote-unquote trusted source of CNN. They think that something's said on there and boom, it's correct. It's just the word is law. And that's not the case. CNN is owned by Time Warner. Time Warner is one of Hillary Clinton's largest donors. So the reason that you see voter suppression and it only affects one candidate positively, which is Hillary Clinton, you understand why people like Bernie Sanders are out there fighting the establishment. And to be quite honest, as it stands right this second, losing. After everything that's been done, you look at the rallies that are going on, and you're talking about 30,000, there was like 40,000 people at one rally in New York. That's just one rally in one park in one section of New York. And they have like 28,000 like in the park. And the police, NYPD, had estimated something along the lines of 40,000 total out in the streets and and spilt out into the other areas around the park, plus the people in the park. And you look at some Hillary Clinton rallies with like 1,000 people, 2,000 people, and you got to wonder, how is Hillary Clinton winning so much? How's her delegate lead been so far from the beginning? How did she get all these super delegates right from the start when they didn't even know anything about the other candidates for the most part? And that is exactly what we're talking about, folks. It is that kind of, those tactics, if you will, that are stomping out, silencing, getting rid of the voice of the average everyday people. And then you see everything that happens in Congress, all these laws that come into effect that only benefit corporations, billionaires, the super wealthy, and you can see exactly what's going on. So, honestly, the voter suppression, everything that's happening, I'm really not as surprised because of looking at the way that the country's going. And that's exactly why I wanted to take the time and make my first show all about it. So that way everyone else sees, exactly what's happening. Because right now, the political revolution, the feeling the burn, that fire is facing a rather large water source of establishment trying to put out that burn. And when it boils down to it, if we are honestly looking at a Hillary Clinton versus Donald Trump general election, as entertaining as it'll most likely be, it's not what's best for this country. Based off everything that we're seeing, that's really not what's best for this country. Because at the end of the day, they have said so many contradictory things that you really don't know 100%. No one can say with 100% certainty Hillary Clinton absolutely is going to be the person that she always has been. Because that person has changed a lot. And I don't know if it's necessarily been real changes, but the political stances have changed quite a bit. You know, it's like a meme that I saw on the internet a couple of days ago that said one of the most epic debate ideas ever would be Hillary Clinton in 1992 versus Hillary Clinton in 2003 versus Hillary Clinton in 2008 versus Hillary Clinton in 2016. Because you're literally looking at 4 different people. So we're going to see where it goes moving forward. We're going to see what happens. I am in no means giving up on hope. I'm in no means giving up on, fighting towards true democracy, which is exactly what this country needs. But I got to tell you, when it comes down to the Democratic primaries, when it comes down to all this voter suppression, if we don't change everything that's happening, we will not win. We will not win this election, and every election moving forward, if this is successful, is just going to show, the Democratic National Convention, all those Democratic Party leaders, that they really can do whatever they want and get away with it. That they really have the power to choose who is going to be our next elected official and who's going to be going home. So there's a lot of other things that I want to get to. But again, like I said, I'm going to cut it short because this is my first ever show. I'm going to be talking about some topics and the next one ranging from the Republican primaries to the transgender bathroom laws are some issues that I would like to cover. If there's any questions or comments for me, you're always welcome to email me, NickOfTimeNews@gmail.com. I have again rejoined Twitter. My handle is at NickOfTimeNews, at NickOfTimeNews. And then, of course, NickOfTimeNews /off of Twitter.com is the page. So it's Twitter.com /NickOfTimeNews if you want to get to the actual page itself. But in the link, any help is appreciated. I want to send this as far as I can. This month I may only get up to 150, 200 listeners. A couple months from now, you could be looking at 1,000. By the beginning of next year, I could be looking at 10,000. But if there's one thing I can tell you for sure, it's that I will not stop giving 110% to the project. Because I honestly believe that this is exactly what we need. We need more information that's getting out to people so they understand what's happening in the country. And, whether it's a share of the campaign, which will be in the description, or whether it's a donation, like I said, $10, $20, it goes a very long way in terms of what I'm trying to do here. So I thank you so much, and until next time, this has been Nick of Time News with your host, Nick Dorsey.